What you are about to hear is a fictional bedtime narrative, gently inspired by themes and passages from the book of Romans in the Holy Bible. This is not a word-for-word scripture reading, and it is not intended to replace one. It is simply a calm, prayerful retelling, shaped for rest, shaped for quiet, shaped for the kind of evening where all you need to do is close your eyes and be still. Everything here is safe. Everything here is soft. There is nowhere you need to go tonight, and nothing you need to solve. So settle in. Let the pillow take the full weight of your head, and let us begin. I find myself walking along Roman road at dusk. The stones beneath my feet are old and smooth, worn down by centuries of travelers who came before me. The air is warm but not heavy. There is a thin breeze that carries the scent of olive groves somewhere off to the west, and the sky above me is doing that thing it does in the last hour before nightfall, turning from pale gold to a soft dusted violet. I am not in a hurry. I am not running from anything or toward anything. I am simply here, walking, listening, and in my hand I carry a letter. It is long, longer than most letters I have ever held. The parchment is slightly rough against my fingertips, and the ink is dark and deliberate. Someone took great care in writing this. Every word was chosen. Every sentence was meant to land somewhere deep in the reader's chest and stay there. The letter is addressed to a community in Rome, a gathering of people, some who grew up knowing the old scriptures by heart, and some who had never heard a single verse until recently. They were different from one another in almost every way, and yet, somehow, they found themselves sitting in the same room, sharing the same bread, whispering the same prayers at night. The man who wrote to them was named Paul, and I do not need to explain everything about Paul tonight. That is not what this evening is for. Tonight, I only need to tell you that he was someone who had been completely turned around. He once walked in one direction with absolute certainty, and then something happened, something bright, something that he could not argue with. And he found himself walking the other way entirely, not with less certainty, with more, but a different kind, a softer kind, the kind of certainty that does not need to shout. He wrote this letter because he wanted the people in Rome to understand something that he himself had only recently begun to understand. Something about grace, something about how the whole human story, every broken chapter of it, was always heading somewhere good. Let your shoulders soften now, just a little. You do not need to hold them up tonight. Let them drop gently, like a coat sliding off a hook. I walk the road, and I unroll the letter a little further, and I begin to read by the last of the fading light. The letter opens the way a deep breath opens. Paul says in his own way, I am not ashamed of this message I carry, because it holds inside it a kind of power, not the loud kind, not the forceful kind, but the kind that rescues, the kind that makes whole, and it is offered to everyone, to every single person who is willing to simply receive it. I pause on the road and I read that line again. Everyone, not just the learned, not just the righteous, not just those who got everything right the first time. Everyone, he goes on. And what he says next is honest in a way that might sting a little, except that tonight we will let it land gently. He says that people have always known, somewhere inside themselves, that there is something greater than what they can see. The world itself whispers it. The sky at night practically shouts it. The way rain falls on dry ground, the way a child laughs before anyone teaches them what laughter is. All of it points somewhere. All of it hums with a quiet signal, like a low note on a cello. always playing underneath everything else. And yet, Paul says, people turned away from that signal, not all at once, not dramatically. They just drifted, slowly. The way you drift in a boat when you stop rowing. They exchanged what was true for what was easier. They traded depth for surface. And the result was not punishment from the outside. It was simply the natural unraveling that happens when someone lets go of the thread. Now, Paul is careful here, and I want to be careful too, because in the very next breath, he turns to the people who are nodding along, the ones thinking, yes, those other people really did lose their way. And he says, gently but directly, you are no different. Every time you judge someone else, he says you are describing yourself, because you have done the same things in your own way, in your own quiet rooms, in your own hidden hours. I walk a little further along the road. The sky is darker now. A few stars have appeared, not many, just the brave early ones that always show up first. And I think about what Paul is doing here at the beginning of his letter. He is leveling the ground. He is not building anyone up by tearing someone else down. He is saying, softly and firmly, we are all standing in the same place, under the same sky, with the same need. There is no one on this road tonight who has it all figured out. There is no one listening to this who is beyond the reach of grace. And there is no one listening who does not need it. Let your jaw relax now. You may not have noticed you were holding tension there. Just let your teeth part slightly. Let your tongue rest against the bottom of your mouth. There is nothing you need to say right now. No words you need to form. Just rest. I keep walking. Paul continues in his letter, and now he arrives at the part that I think he has been waiting to say all along. He has spent the opening pages showing that everyone, every person, everywhere, in every tradition, in every background, falls short, not as an accusation, as a diagnosis. The way a doctor names what is wrong not to shame you, but to begin healing you. And now he says, but here is what happened next. A righteousness has appeared. Not the kind you earn, not the kind you build with your own hands, brick by careful brick, hoping the tower is tall enough. No, this is the kind that is given, freely, completely, to anyone who receives it through faith. I read that word on the parchment, faith, and I turn it over in my mind the way you turn a smooth stone over in your palm. Faith, as Paul describes it, is not a feeling of certainty. It is not the absence of doubt. It is something more like trust, the way a child falls asleep in the back seat of a car, because they trust that someone who loves them is driving. They do not need to see the road. They do not need to check the map. They simply close their eyes and rest, because they know they are held. Paul points back to an old story, the story of Abraham, a man who was given a promise so unlikely that it would have been reasonable to laugh. And Abraham did not earn the fulfillment of that promise. He simply believed it. And that belief, that willingness to hold an open hand instead of a clenched fist, was counted as righteousness. Not because belief is magic, but because belief is the posture of someone who has stopped trying to save themselves and has agreed, finally, to be saved. I sit down now on a low stone wall beside the road. The stars are thickening overhead. The olive groves are silver in the early moonlight. Somewhere far off, I hear the sound of water. A stream, maybe, or a fountain in a courtyard I cannot see. Paul writes about peace. He says, since we have been made right through faith, we have peace with God. Peace, not a truce, not a temporary ceasefire. Peace, the kind that settles into the bones, the kind that does not depend on circumstances, the kind that remains even when the night is long and the questions have no answers yet. And then he says something that surprises me. He says that suffering, the hard seasons, the difficult passages, produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint. Because love has been poured into our hearts, like water poured into a dry vessel, filling every crack. I sit with that for a moment. Love poured in, not earned, not pursued, poured, like someone tilting a pitcher over a cup and not stopping until the cup overflows. And here is the line that makes me set the letter down in my lap and look up at the sky. While we were still in the middle of our mess, while we were still far from where we were meant to be, that is when grace arrived. Not after we cleaned ourselves up, not after we got our act together. In the middle of it, in the thick of it, Grace walked in and sat down beside us and said, "I am here now, and I am not leaving. Let your hands go loose. If they are resting on your chest or beside you on the bed, let the fingers uncurl. Let the palms go soft. You are not holding anything tonight. You are being held." I close my eyes for a moment on that stone wall, and a story comes to me, not from the letter, from somewhere else, somewhere gentle. I see a woman named Maren. She lives in a small house at the edge of a village, the kind of village where everyone knows which chimney belongs to which family, just by the color of the smoke. Maren is a weaver. She works with wool and linen, and her hands are always busy, always moving, always pulling threads into patterns. But tonight, her loom is still. She is sitting on her doorstep, looking out at the last light draining from the hills, and she is thinking about all the things she has not finished. The blanket she promised her neighbor, the shawl for her mother, the long tapestry she started 3 winters ago and has never completed. She keeps a list in her head, a long scrolling list of every incomplete thing, and she carries it the way some people carry stones in their pockets, quietly, heavily, without telling anyone. She believes, and she has believed this for as long as she can remember, that she will only be at peace when the list is done, when every thread is tied, when every promise is fulfilled, and every task is crossed off, and every loose end is woven in. But the list never ends. It only grows. And tonight, sitting on her doorstep, she is tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind of tired that goes deeper, the kind that lives in the space between who she is and who she thinks she should be. And then something happens. A neighbor, an old man named Thomas who walks with a cane and speaks very little, comes shuffling down the path. He does not stop to chat. He simply sets something on the step beside her, a small loaf of bread, still warm, wrapped in cloth. And he says, quietly, without looking at her, "You do not need to finish anything tonight, Maren. You are already enough as you are." And he walks on. She sits there holding the bread, and something in her chest loosens, not because the list has gotten shorter, not because anything in her circumstances has changed, but because someone saw her, saw the weight she was carrying, and offered her something she did not ask for. Grace, I think, often looks like warm bread on a doorstep. Peace arrived for Maren not at the end of her striving, but in the middle of it, while she was still sitting with her unfinished work and her quiet shame. Peace came and sat down beside her and said, "I am here now." She eats the bread. She watches the stars come out one by one. And for the first time in a long time, she does not add anything to the list. She simply rests. Let your eyelids grow heavier now, if they haven't already. You do not need to keep them open. There is nothing to see, only something to hear, and you can hear it just as well, maybe even better, with your eyes closed. I open my eyes again on the Roman road. The night is fully here now. The sky is wide and deep and filled with more stars than I could count in a lifetime. I pick up the letter and tilt it toward the moonlight. Paul is writing about something that feels like waking up. He says that something happened, something decisive, something complete, and because of it, the old version of ourselves no longer has the final word. He uses the image of going underwater and coming back up again. Going down is one thing, rising as another. Not a different person exactly, but a freed person, someone who has been untied from a weight they were never meant to carry. The old self, Paul says, was bound, not by chains you could see, but by patterns, by habits of the heart, by the gravity of always choosing the easier wrong over the harder right. And that binding was real. It was heavy. It shaped the way you walked through the world. But now, he says, you have been released from that contract. You are no longer obligated to live according to the old terms. I think about that as I walk. The road stretches ahead of me, pale in the moonlight. And I think about how strange and beautiful it is, the idea that you can be released from something without having defeated it yourself, that freedom can be a gift, not a conquest. Paul is honest, though. He does not pretend that the old patterns vanish overnight. In the next part of his letter, he writes something so human, so recognizable, that I almost smile in the dark. He says, "The good I want to do, I do not do, and the thing I do not want to do, that is what I keep doing." And I think everyone who has ever tried to be better knows exactly what he means. The late night promise you made to yourself that dissolved by morning, the resolve that felt so strong at noon and so fragile by evening, the way you know the right path and still find yourself wandering off it, not out of rebellion, but out of some deep, tangled reflex you cannot seem to unlearn. Paul does not solve this tension neatly. He sits in it. He lets it be what it is, a real struggle, an honest ache. And then he asks the question that every tired heart has asked at some point in the dark: who will rescue me from this? And his answer is not a strategy. It is not a 5-step plan. It is a name. It is a person. It is grace, arriving again, not because we figured it out, but because we finally admitted we could not. Let your breathing slow now, just a little, not forced, not controlled. Just let each exhale last a moment longer than the last, like a tide going out, gently, naturally. Your body knows how to do this. You do not need to think about it. Just let it happen. And now Paul arrives at what I believe is the heart of his entire letter. He writes one line that lands like a hand resting softly on your shoulder. There is now no condemnation. I stop walking when I read it. No condemnation, not reduced condemnation, not conditional condemnation, not condemnation on hold until you mess up again. None. The case has been closed. The verdict has already been given, and it is not guilty. Not because you were innocent, but because someone else stepped into the courtroom and took the full weight of everything that was ever held against you and carried it away. And now you walk free. Paul says, the law of the Spirit of life has set you free from the law of sin and death. And I do not think he means law the way we usually think of law. Rules on a page, penalties for violations. I think he means something more like gravity, a force, a pull. There was a pull toward death, toward decay, toward unraveling. And now there is a stronger pull, a pull toward life, toward wholeness, toward the kind of morning that comes after the longest night. He says that the mind set on the Spirit is life and peace. Life and peace. I stand still on the road and I let those words settle over me the way dew settles on grass in the early hours. You do not see it happen. You only notice, later, that everything is glistening. The road ahead of me is long. The letter in my hand is only half read. And there is so much more to hear. About love that will not let go. About hope that does not disappoint. About a future so bright that the present suffering is not even worth comparing to it. But that is for the next stretch of road. For now, I simply stand beneath the stars. The air is cool and clean. The world is quiet. And somewhere, deep in the words of this letter, I hear a voice that is not loud, not demanding, not urgent, just steady, just sure, just kind, saying, "There is no condemnation for you, not tonight, not ever. Rest in that." The road curves gently to the left, and as I follow it, the landscape opens up. The olive groves fall away behind me, and I find myself walking along a ridge. To my right, the land drops into a wide valley, soft and blue in the moonlight, and I can see the faint lights of farmhouses scattered across the lowlands like fallen stars. I unroll the letter a little more. Paul is still in the middle of his great declaration, this chapter that feels less like a letter and more like a song, like something that was meant to be read aloud on a hilltop with the wind moving through it. He says that we do not walk according to the flesh anymore, but according to the Spirit. And he does not mean flesh the way we might think. He does not mean the body is the enemy, that skin and bone and breath are things to be escaped. He means something more like the old operating system, the old way of calculating your worth, the old ledger where you were always coming up short, always one good deed behind, always trying to outrun a debt you could never fully pay. That system, Paul says, has been replaced, not upgraded, replaced. The new way is not about striving harder. It is about receiving deeper. It is about the Spirit of God dwelling in you, not visiting, not passing through, not stopping by on occasion. Dwelling, making a home, settling in the way light settles into a room when you open the curtains in the morning. And then Paul says something that catches me, the way a melody catches you when you hear it drifting from an open window. He says, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, that when we do not know how to pray, when the words will not come, when the ache is too deep for language, when all we can do is sit in the dark and breathe, the Spirit intercedes for us, with groanings too deep for words. I like that. I find great comfort in it, actually. The idea that even your wordless sighs are heard, that the prayer you cannot form is still received, that your silence is not empty. It is full of a language you do not speak, but someone understands perfectly. I walk along the ridge and the night breeze moves through the dry grass beside the road, and it sounds a little like whispering, like the whole landscape is praying in its own quiet way. Paul continues, and now he writes a line that has carried people through some of the darkest chapters of their lives. He says, "We know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, for those who are called according to his purpose." All things, not just the beautiful things, not just the easy things, not just the moments that make sense while they are happening, all things. The difficult diagnosis, the unexpected loss, the season that felt like winter would never end. Even those things, Paul says, are being woven into something, not wasted, not random, woven. the way a weaver takes dark threads and light threads and pulls them together into a pattern that only makes sense when you step back far enough to see the whole cloth. You do not have to see the whole cloth tonight. You only have to trust that there is one. And then Paul builds to something. I can feel it in the rhythm of his words, the way you can feel a song approaching its final chorus. He begins to ask questions, but they are not uncertain questions. They are the questions of someone who already knows the answer and wants you to feel the weight of it. If God is for us, he asks, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, freely give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Who is the one who condemns? And then the question that opens like a door into a room with no walls. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble? Shall hardship? Shall persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? And I hold my breath because I know what comes next. And it is one of the most beautiful things ever committed to parchment. No, Paul says, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced, and the word convinced lands with the quiet authority of someone who has tested this in the furnace of real life, who has been shipwrecked and beaten and left for dead and still stands. I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor rulers, neither things present nor things to come, nor powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God. Nothing. I stop on the ridge. I let the letter rest against my chest, and I look out over the valley, and I let that word settle into me. Nothing. Not your worst day, not your deepest regret, not the thing you have never told anyone, not the fear that wakes you at 3 a.m, not the distance you feel sometimes between who you are and who you wish you were. None of it. None of it is strong enough. None of it is deep enough. None of it is final enough to separate you from a love that has already decided it will not let go. Let your whole body sink a little deeper into the bed now. Feel the mattress beneath you, how it holds you without effort, how it asks nothing of you. You are supported, you are held, and nothing in all creation can change that tonight. The story finds me as I stand on the ridge. It arrives the way a cloud arrives, slowly, without announcement, already forming before you notice it. I see a man named Ephraim. He is a potter. He lives in a small workshop behind his house, and the workshop smells of wet clay and cedar smoke, and the floor is always faintly damp. His hands are thick and strong, and they are always stained a kind of reddish brown from the earth he works with. He's been making vessels for 30 years, bowls, jars, pitchers, cups, and each one carries the quiet signature of his fingerprints pressed into the clay before it dried. But this year has been hard for Ephraim. His kiln cracked in the spring. A deep fracture ran through the back wall, and now the heat does not hold the way it should. Half of what he fires comes out wrong, warped, discolored, brittle in places it should be strong. He pulls piece after piece from the kiln and sets them aside on a long wooden shelf, a shelf that he has started calling privately the shelf of failures. He does not complain. That is not Ephraim's way. He simply works. He mixes the clay. He centers it on the wheel. He shapes it with his steady hands, and then he places it in the cracked kiln and hopes. But tonight, he is sitting on the floor of his workshop, his back against the wall, his hands resting on his knees, and he is too tired to hope. He does not pray, because he does not know what to ask for. A new kiln? He cannot afford one. More skill? He has plenty of skill. The kiln is the problem, not his hands. A different life? He does not want a different life. He wants this life, this clay, this work. He just wants it to stop breaking. So he sits, and he breathes, and he says nothing. And I think, watching him, this is the groaning too deep for words that Paul wrote about. This is the prayer that has no language, the sigh that rises from a place below thought, below intention, below even feeling. It is the soul simply presenting itself, open-handed, empty-mouthed, to whatever listens in the dark. Ephraim sits there for a long time, and then because he does not know what else to do, he stands up and walks to the shelf of failures. He picks up one of the warped bowls. It leans to one side. Its rim is uneven, its glaze pooled too thickly on the bottom and too thinly on the lip. By every standard he knows, it is ruined, but he holds it up to the lamplight, and he turns it, and something happens. The uneven glaze catches the light in a way he has never seen before. The place where the color pooled too thickly has become a deep, luminous blue, almost like a night sky, and the thin spots shimmer, faintly, like the first pale light before dawn. The bowl is not what he intended, but it is something unexpected, something he could not have planned. He sets it on his workbench. He picks up another failed piece, and another, and slowly, turning each one in the light, he begins to see what the cracked kiln has been doing all along, not ruining his work, redirecting it, pushing it somewhere he would never have gone on his own. By morning, Ephraim has arranged 12 pieces on his workbench. None of them are what he set out to make. All of them are beautiful in ways he does not fully understand. All things work together, not always in the way we expect, not always on the timeline we prefer, but the hands that shape our lives are steadier than we know, and the kiln, even the cracked kiln, even the one that does not hold its heat, is still part of the making. Ephraim does not get a new kiln that night. He does not need one. What he gets is something quieter than a solution. He gets a shift, a turning, the kind of change that happens not in your circumstances, but in the way you see your circumstances. And that sometimes is the deeper rescue. He sleeps well that night for the first time in weeks. His hands are still stained with clay. His kiln is still cracked. But something has been rearranged inside him, and it feels like peace. Let your breathing continue to slow, each breath a little longer, each exhale a little softer, like a stream that widens as it approaches the sea. There is no rush. There is nowhere to be. Only here, only now, only rest. I begin walking again. The ridge descends gradually, and the road takes me down into the valley. The air is warmer here, sheltered from the wind, and I can smell night-blooming flowers, jasmine maybe, or something like it. Sweet and unhurried. The next section of Paul's letter is different from what came before. The song of chapter 8 gives way to something more like a long, careful conversation. Paul is wrestling with a question that clearly sits heavy on his heart. What about his own people? What about Israel, the people who were given the promises, the covenants, the law, the temple, the prophets, the people through whom the whole story was carried, generation after generation, like a flame passed from one pair of hands to the next? What has happened to them in this new chapter of the story? And I can hear, even in the measured cadence of his words, that this question costs him something. He says, and I believe him, that he carries great sorrow for his people, that he would trade his own place if it would bring them closer to the truth he has found. But Paul does not resolve this tension with a simple answer. He goes deep. He goes back to the very beginning, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, and he traces the thread of God's choosing. And what emerges slowly is not a picture of a God who discards, but a picture of a God who works in unexpected ways, who chooses the younger over the older, who calls things into being that did not exist, who has purposes that run deeper and longer than any single generation can see. Paul uses the image of a potter, and I think of Ephraim for a moment, his stained hands, his cracked kiln, and he says that the potter has the right to make from the same lump of clay vessels for different purposes, not because some clay is better than other clay, but because the potter sees the whole shelf. The potter knows what is needed. The potter is working towards something we cannot see from where we stand. This might feel unsettling if Paul left it there, but he does not. He presses forward chapter by chapter, and what he arrives at is not a theology of rejection. It is a theology of patience, of timing, of a faithfulness so long and so wide that it stretches past what we can measure. He says that Israel has not stumbled beyond recovery, that their misstep became an opening, a door through which grace poured out to the rest of the world, and he marvels at this. You can feel the wonder in his words, the way one story folds into another, the way what looked like an ending was actually a beginning in disguise. And then he gives us the image that I think is the centerpiece of this whole section. An olive tree, an old, ancient olive tree with roots that go deep into the earth, deeper than anyone can dig. The roots are the promises made to Abraham and the patriarchs. The trunk is the long, continuous story of God's faithfulness. And the branches, some are natural. Some have been grafted in from wild olive shoots, different origins, different bark, but drawing from the same root, fed by the same sap, alive because of the same ancient, underground faithfulness that has never once dried up. Paul warns the grafted branches, those who came later, those who were not part of the original tree, not to boast over the natural branches. You do not support the root, he says. The root supports you. I like this image. I find it deeply restful. The idea that I am connected to something old and living, that the story I am part of did not begin with me and will not end with me, that there are roots beneath me, ancient, faithful, nourished by promises made in the dark to people who trusted without seeing. And those roots hold me up even now, even tonight, even when I cannot feel them. And then Paul steps back, and he looks at the whole picture, Israel's past, the present mystery, the future hope. And he says something that sounds less like theology and more like someone who has just glimpsed something too beautiful for organized thought. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, how untraceable are his paths. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has given to him that it should be paid back? For from him, and through him, and to him are all things, from him, through him, to him. Like a river that begins in the mountains and flows through the valley, and eventually, after every bend and every rapid and every still, quiet pool, finds its way to the sea, everything begins in God. Everything moves through God. Everything returns to God. There is a deep, slow peace in that, the peace of knowing that the story has an author, that the river has a destination, that nothing is wasted and nothing is lost, and the roots go deeper than you will ever know. Let your body feel heavy now, not the heaviness of burden, the heaviness of rest, the heaviness of a body that has been given permission to stop working, stop guarding, stop holding itself upright. Let the bed carry you. You are as safe as a branch held by an ancient tree. The roots are deep. The roots hold. Another story arrives, the way a leaf arrives on the surface of a stream, without effort, already in motion before I noticed it. I see a girl named Lucia. She is perhaps 12. She lives with her grandmother on a hillside, where olive trees grow in long, patient rows. The trees are older than anyone in the village, older than the village itself. Some of them have trunks so wide and so gnarled that they look like they are made of stone rather than wood, and yet, every spring, they push out new leaves. Soft silver-green leaves that catch the light and turn it into something gentle. Lucia's grandmother is a quiet woman. She speaks in short sentences and long silences. She has hands that are rough from decades of work, and eyes that are kind in a way that does not need to announce itself. Every evening, she and Lucia walk among the olive trees, and the grandmother checks each one the way a mother checks on sleeping children. A touch here, a glance there, a small nod of satisfaction. One evening, Lucia notices something she has not seen before. On one of the oldest trees, the one her grandmother calls the grandfather tree, there is a branch that looks different from the others. Its bark is rougher. Its leaves are slightly larger and a different shade of green. It does not quite match. "What is that?" she asks. Her grandmother stops. She places her hand on the trunk of the old tree and looks up at the mismatched branch. "That," she says, "is a graft. Years ago, before you were born, before I was born, someone took a cutting from a wild olive tree and joined it to this one. They made a small wound in the trunk and tucked the wild branch inside, and they bound it with cloth and waited. And slowly, over time, the old tree accepted the new branch, drew it in, shared its sap, fed it from its own roots." Lucia looks up at the branch. It is full of fruit, heavy with small, dark olives that gleam in the evening light. "But it is different from the other branches," she says. "Yes," her grandmother says, "it is different. It came from somewhere else. It did not grow here naturally, but it belongs here now. The tree has made it its own. The roots feed it the same as they feed every other branch, and the fruit it bears is good." They stand there for a while, looking up at the old tree with its natural branches and its grafted one, all of them reaching toward the same sky, all of them fed by the same deep roots, all of them heavy with the same patient fruit. Lucia asks, "Does the wild branch know it is different?" Her grandmother smiles. "I think," she says, "it knows it is loved, and that is enough." They walk home as the sun sets. The olive trees cast long shadows across the hillside, and Lucia holds her grandmother's hand, and she thinks about roots and belonging, and the way an old tree can make room for something new without losing anything of what it was. That night, Lucia falls asleep quickly. The window is open, and the breeze carries the scent of the olive grove into her room. And in her dreams, she is a branch, not wondering whether she is natural or grafted, not worrying about whether she matches, simply growing, simply receiving, simply held by a tree so old and so strong that the idea of falling never even occurs to her. You are held like that tonight, by roots you did not plant, by a faithfulness you did not earn, by a story that began long before you and will continue long after, and in which you are, right now, right here, just as you are, a living, growing, belonging branch. I walk on through the valley. The road is soft here, packed earth rather than stone, and my footsteps are almost silent. The letter rests against my chest, half read, half waiting. There is so much more ahead. Paul has not yet told the Roman believers how to live out everything he has described. He has not yet spoken about love being the fulfillment of the law. He has not yet asked them to offer their whole selves, not out of obligation, but as an act of quiet worship. He has not yet whispered about the night being almost over and the day being near. All of that is coming. It is waiting down the road, around the next bend, in the next stretch of starlight. But for now, I walk slowly, and the valley is still, and the flowers are breathing their sweetness into the dark, and somewhere above me, a night bird sings a single, clear note, and then falls silent, as if even the bird knows that some moments are too full for sound. Your body is growing heavier now. Your thoughts are growing softer. The edges of the day are blurring, the way watercolors blur when you add just a little too much water. Not ruined, just softened, just allowed to bleed into each other until the boundaries dissolve and everything becomes gentle and indistinct. This is good. This is how the body prepares for sleep, not by trying, by releasing, by letting go of one thing at a time until there is nothing left to hold. Let the next breath be the slowest one yet, and the one after that even slower. I am still here. The road is still here. The letter is still here, and we will continue whenever you are ready. The valley floor is level and kind beneath my feet. The road here is lined with low stone fences on either side, the kind that farmers build slowly over years, fitting each stone against the next by feel and by patience rather than by plan. I let my hand trail along the top of one as I walk. The stones are cool and smooth. They have been here a long time, and they will be here long after I have passed. I unroll the letter again. Something has shifted in Paul's writing. The first 11 chapters were like a deep breath drawn in. All that theology, all that wonder, all that tracing of God's faithfulness from the very first promise to the present moment. And now, beginning here, Paul breathes out. He moves from what is true to how that truth is lived, from the roots of the tree to the fruit on the branch. And the very first thing he says is this: I urge you, in view of all this mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, pleasing. This is your true and proper worship. And I notice, walking quietly through the dark, that he does not say offer your perfection. He does not say offer your accomplishments or your moral record or the polished version of yourself that you present to the world on your best days. He says offer your body, your actual, imperfect, breathing, sleeping, waking body, the one that gets tired, the one that aches, the one that is lying in a bed right now, listening to these words in the dark. That body, Paul says, is the offering, not because it is flawless, because it is real, because it is here, because showing up, just being present, just being willing, is the deepest kind of worship there is. And then he says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think about that word, transformed, not repaired, not adjusted, not improved around the edges, transformed, the way a seed is transformed when it becomes a tree. It does not become a better seed. It becomes something entirely new. And the transformation does not happen by effort. It happens by surrender, by allowing something to work in you that is larger than your own will. The renewing of the mind, I think, is not about thinking harder. It is about thinking differently, seeing differently, waking up one morning and realizing that the lens through which you have been looking at everything, yourself, others, the world, God, has been quietly replaced with a clearer one. And you did not do the replacing. It was done for you while you were busy just trying to get through the day. Paul moves on. And now he talks about something practical and beautiful. He says, just as each of us has one body with many parts, and these parts do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each part belongs to all the others. I walk along the stone fence, and I think about that. One body, many parts, each one different, each one necessary. He lists some of the parts. If your gift is prophecy, use it. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is encouraging, then encourage. If it is giving, give generously. If it is leading, lead with care. If it is showing mercy, show it with gladness. There is no hierarchy here. No part is elevated above the others. The one who teaches is not more important than the one who serves. The one who leads is not more valuable than the one who shows mercy. They are all part of the same body. They all matter. They all belong. And I find great rest in that tonight. The idea that I do not need to be everything. I do not need to carry every gift or fill every role or be the whole body all by myself. I only need to be the part I am, faithfully, gently, without comparing myself to the parts I am not. Paul continues, and his instructions become simpler, softer, more like a father sitting with his children by a fire, offering them the kind of wisdom that does not need to be argued, only received. Love must be sincere, he says. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. I read those last two lines again because they strike me as some of the most human words in the entire letter. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Not fix, not advise, not explain. Just be present. Just stand beside someone in their joy and let yourself feel it with them. Just sit beside someone in their grief and let yourself feel that too. That is love, I think, not a theory, not a doctrine, a presence, a willingness to be in the room, to not look away, to not rush to the next thing, to simply say with your body and your time and your attention, I am here, and what you feel matters to me. Let your face go soft now. The muscles around your eyes, the small muscles in your forehead that you did not realize you were tensing. Let them release. Let your whole face become smooth and still, like the surface of a pond when the wind stops. There is nothing to figure out. There is nothing to react to. There is only this moment and this breath and this quiet road through the dark. A story settles over me like a light blanket drawn up to the shoulders. I see a village, a very small village, the kind you could walk from one end to the other in the time it takes to eat an apple. It sits at the meeting place of two rivers, and the sound of water is always present, always underneath everything, the way a heartbeat is always underneath a life. In this village, there is a tradition. Every Sunday evening, the villagers gather in the square, not for a meeting, not for a service, for something simpler than that. They call it the telling. One by one, anyone who wishes to speak stands up and tells the others what their week held, not a report, not a performance, just an honest, unhurried telling. And the rule, the only rule, is that the listeners must respond with their whole hearts. If someone shares good news, the village rejoices, not politely, not with restrained nods. They rejoice, they clap, they laugh. They say the person's name aloud, as if the name itself is a celebration. The baker, whose bread did not rise on Tuesday, stands and says that on Thursday he made the finest loaf of his life, golden, soft, with a crust that sang when you pressed it. And the whole square erupts in warmth, not because bread is a grand thing, but because it is his thing. It is the part of the body that he is, and when his part flourishes, the whole body feels it. And if someone shares sorrow, the village weeps, not dramatically, not performatively, quietly, genuinely, the way water moves toward the lowest point without being told. There is an old woman in the village named Renata. She lost her husband 2 winters ago, and she thought she had moved past the sharpest edge of grief. But this week, she found one of his shirts folded in the back of a drawer she had not opened in months, and the smell of him was still in the fabric. And the grief returned, not like a wave, but like a tide, slow, rising, filling every room. She stands in the square on Sunday evening, and she holds the shirt in her hands, and she says only, "I found this, and I miss him." And the village does not try to fix it. No one says he is in a better place, or time heals all things, or you need to move forward. They simply sit with her. Some of them close their eyes. Some of them reach for the hand of the person next to them. A few of them cry, not because they knew her husband well, but because they know what it is to lose. They know what it is to find something that belongs to someone who is no longer here, and they let themselves feel it with her. And Renata, standing in the square with the shirt in her hands, feels something shift. The grief does not leave, but it changes shape. It becomes lighter, not because it weighs less, but because it is now distributed, shared, carried by more than one pair of shoulders. That is what Paul meant, I think. One body, many parts. When one part suffers, every part suffers with it. When one part rejoices, every part rejoices with it. There is a man in the village named Soren. He is very quiet. He does not have a craft or a trade that anyone notices. He is not the baker or the healer or the teacher or the builder. What Soren does is listen. That is his gift. When someone speaks, Soren turns his whole self toward them, not just his ears, but his eyes, his posture, his attention, and he listens the way the earth listens to rain, completely, without resistance, without agenda. People sometimes wonder what Soren contributes to the village. He does not make anything. He does not grow anything. He does not lead anything. But if you ask anyone in the village who they go to when the night is long and the thoughts are heavy, they will all say the same name, Soren, because sometimes the most important part of the body is the part that simply receives, the part that holds space, the part that says, not with words, but with presence, I am here, and you are not alone. Soren sleeps well at night. He sleeps the way people sleep who have spent the day being exactly who they were made to be. Not more, not less, not pretending, not performing. Just being, just showing up, just offering the one gift they have and trusting that it is enough. And it is. It is always enough. You are enough tonight. Whatever you brought to the day, whatever part of the body you were, it was enough. You do not need to have been more. You do not need to have done more. You showed up. You were present. And that, in the arithmetic of grace, counts for more than you know. The road has brought me to the other side of the valley now, and it begins to climb again. Not steeply, gently. The way the ground rises toward a hill that is in no hurry to become a mountain. I climb with it, and my breathing is slow and even, and the stars above me have shifted slightly, the way they do when the night is deepening, turning on their slow wheel toward morning. I return to the letter. Paul is writing about how to live among others, how to move through the world as someone who has been loved without condition and now carries that love into every room they enter. He talks about honoring authority, about paying what is owed, about living in such a way that the people around you are not burdened by your presence, but blessed by it. These are practical words, simple words, the kind of wisdom that does not dazzle, but endures. And then he draws all of it together into a single, luminous statement. Let no debt remain outstanding, he says, except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments: do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet. All of these, he says, are summed up in one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. I pause on the hillside and I let that land. Love is the fulfillment, not knowledge, not ritual, not theological precision, not being right about every doctrine and every detail. Love, simple, stubborn, showing up again and again love, the kind that does no harm, the kind that sees the other person, truly sees them, and chooses again and again and again to treat them as someone who matters. Paul makes it sound simple, and in a way it is. Love is not complicated. It is just costly. It costs your pride. It costs your convenience. It costs your right to hold a grudge or keep score or walk away when things get difficult. But the cost, Paul seems to say, is nothing compared to what you receive in return. Because when you love, truly love, without agenda, without conditions, you step into the current of something that has been flowing since before the world began. And that current carries you. It does not drain you. It fills you. And then Paul writes something that makes me look up at the sky. And do this, he says, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber. Because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. I stand on the hillside and I look east, and of course there is no dawn yet. The sky is still deep and dark and full of stars. But somewhere beyond the horizon, somewhere I cannot see but can somehow feel, the first pale suggestion of morning is gathering. Not yet, not for a long while yet, but it is coming. It is always coming. The night is nearly over. What a thing to say to someone lying in the dark. What a gift to offer someone in the middle of their longest night. You are not stuck here. This is not permanent. The darkness is real, but it is temporary. And the light that is coming is not a small light. It is the kind of light that does not just illuminate, it transforms. It remakes everything it touches. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness, Paul says, and put on the armor of light. I like that he calls it armor, not because we are going to war, but because light, in Paul's mind, is strong. It is protective. It is something you wear, something that surrounds you and holds you and guards you from the things that prowl in the dark. You are wearing that light tonight, even now, even in the dark of your room, even with your eyes closed and your body heavy with sleep. The light is on you, around you, within you, and the morning is coming. Paul then shifts in the next chapter to something more tender. He talks about the way believers should treat one another when they disagree, and what strikes me is how gentle he is about it. He says, "Accept the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. One person eats everything," he says. "Another eats only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not look down on the one who does not, and the one who does not eat everything must not condemn the one who does." for God has accepted them both. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? Paul asks. To their own master they stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. I love that quiet confidence. They will stand, not because they are strong enough, because the Lord is able to make them stand. Each person, Paul says, is accountable to God alone. So stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. In other words, use your freedom not to prove how free you are, but to make room for others. Walk gently, tread lightly. Be the kind of presence in someone's life that makes their path a little easier, not a little harder. The kingdom of God, he says, is not a matter of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Righteousness, peace, joy, not rules, not regulations, not the anxious keeping of every boundary and every prohibition. Righteousness, peace, and joy, the three fruits of a life that has stopped striving and started receiving, the three qualities of a soul that knows it is loved and has nothing left to prove. Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual building up. Make every effort toward peace. I think that is the only kind of effort Paul would ask of you tonight, not the effort of self-improvement, not the effort of getting it right, the effort of peace, the gentle, quiet, ongoing effort of choosing again and again to be kind, to be patient, to make room, to build up rather than tear down. And that effort, I think, begins with how you treat yourself. So be gentle with yourself tonight, the way Paul asks the Roman believers to be gentle with one another. Accept yourself, the strong parts and the weak parts, the parts that eat everything and the parts that are more cautious. Accept all of it, because God has accepted you, every part, every contradiction, every unfinished edge. Let your shoulders drop again. You may have gathered them back up without noticing. That is all right. Just let them fall. Let the weight of them be taken by the mattress, by the pillow, by the quiet dark that holds you now. You are accepted. You are held. And the night is nearly over, and the day is almost here. One more story drifts toward me. This one comes slowly, like the scent of wood smoke carried from a distant chimney. I see a man named Jonah, not the Jonah of the old scriptures, a different Jonah, a fisherman who lives alone in a cottage at the edge of a gray northern sea. Jonah fishes at night. He has always fished at night, because that is when the fish come close to the surface, drawn upward by the moon or by the tides or by some instinct too old to have a name. He pushes his small boat out into the dark water, and he sets his nets, and he waits. And the waiting is long, and the dark is complete, and the sea makes sounds that, if you are not used to them, might unsettle you. Deep, slow, breathing sounds, as if the water itself is alive and dreaming. But Jonah is used to them. He has been fishing this sea for 40 years. The sounds do not frighten him. They are the sounds of his life, the rhythm underneath his rhythm. Tonight, though, something is different. The catch has been poor for weeks. The nets come up light. The other fishermen in the village have started talking about moving to the larger port town to the south, where the boats are bigger and the waters are richer. And Jonah, sitting in his small boat in the dark, feels something he has not felt in a long time. Doubt. Not the sharp kind, the slow kind, the kind that does not announce itself but simply accumulates, like dust on a windowsill, until one day you notice that you can barely see through the glass. He wonders if he has wasted his life, If all those nights on the water added up to something or added up to nothing. If anyone will remember, after he is gone, that he was here at all. That he went out into the dark, night after night, and cast his nets into the black water, and waited. The sea breathes beneath him. The boat rocks gently. The stars are thick and cold and very far away. And Jonah does not pray exactly. He does something closer to what Ephraim did in his workshop. He simply sits. He lets the doubt be there. He does not fight it or fix it or argue with it. He lets it rest beside him in the boat like an unwelcome passenger who has nowhere else to go. And then, so gradually that he almost misses it, the sky begins to change. It does not get lighter, not yet. It gets softer. The black becomes a shade less absolute. The stars nearest the eastern horizon dim, just barely, as if they are stepping back to make room for something. And Jonah, who has watched 10,000 dawns from this boat, recognizes what is happening. The night is nearly over. It does not feel like it. The water is still dark. The air is still cold. The nets are still light. Nothing in his circumstances has changed, but the sky knows something his circumstances do not. The sky has already begun its slow, faithful turn toward morning. And the morning, once it has begun, cannot be stopped. It cannot be delayed or reversed or argued with. It simply comes. It always comes. Jonah watches. The softness spreads. The east becomes a shade of deep blue that is not quite night and not quite day. A color that exists only for a few minutes. A color so brief and so beautiful that most people sleep through it entirely. But Jonah sees it, and something in his chest loosens. He does not suddenly believe that the fish will come back. He does not suddenly believe that his life has been worthwhile. Those questions remain, sitting beside him in the boat, unanswered. But what changes is simpler than an answer. What changes is his orientation. Instead of facing the dark water, he turns and faces the east, and he watches the light come. It comes slowly, a thin line of gold at the edge of the world, then a widening, then a spilling, as if someone has tipped a bowl of warm honey along the horizon. The water catches it and scatters it, 1,000 fragments of gold dancing on the surface of the sea. And Jonah's boat, his small, old, creaking boat, is suddenly sitting in the middle of more light than he knows what to do with. The fish do not come that morning. The nets stay light. The doubt does not vanish. But Jonah rows home with something he did not have when he set out. Not an answer, a direction, a turning of the face, a decision, made not once, but made again each morning, to look toward the light, to believe that the day is coming even when the night is long, especially when the night is long. He reaches the shore. He pulls the boat up onto the sand, and he stands there for a moment, wet and tired and empty-handed, watching the sun clear the horizon. And it is enough, not because the morning solves anything, but because the morning is a promise kept. Every single day, without exception, the sun rises. It has never once failed. It has never once forgotten. And if the sky can be that faithful, if the light can show up that reliably after every single darkness, then perhaps, Jonah thinks, the same faithfulness is at work in the parts of his life he cannot see. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. And you, lying in your own kind of dark tonight, can rest in that. The morning is coming. Not because you earned it, not because you stayed awake long enough to watch for it, because it is what the morning does. It comes. It always comes. Close your eyes now, if they are not already closed, and picture, if you like, that thin line of gold at the edge of the world. It is there. It is waiting. And it will still be there when you wake. I stand at the top of the hill now. The road has leveled out, and I can see far in every direction. The valley behind me, the ridge I walked earlier, and ahead, another long, gentle slope leading down toward what looks like a small town, a scattering of low buildings with clay roofs, a few lamps still burning in windows, a thread of smoke rising from somewhere near the center. That is where the letter will take me next, into the last pages, the personal greetings, the warm human closeness of Paul naming people he loves, one by one, with affection, with gratitude, with the kind of tenderness that only comes from shared struggle and shared hope. But that is for the final stretch. For now, the wind is still, the road is soft, the sky is wide and patient, and I am in no hurry. Neither are you. Your breath is slow now, slower than when we began. Your body is heavy and warm and still. The thoughts that were sharp at the beginning of the night have gone soft around the edges, like stones worn smooth by a river. They are still there, but they have lost their urgency. They can wait. Everything can wait. There is nothing left to do tonight. Nothing left to solve. Nothing left to earn or prove or figure out. There is only this. You are loved. You are held. The night is nearly over, and the morning will come. Rest now. Rest easy. I will be here when you are ready for the last stretch of road. The road descends toward the small town. My footsteps are quiet on the packed earth. The lamps I saw from the hilltop grow warmer and larger as I approach, and I can begin to make out details. A wooden gate left slightly open, a clay pot of herbs on a windowsill, a cat curled on a low wall with its eyes half closed, watching me pass with the lazy disinterest of a creature that has no obligations and knows it. I like this town already. It feels like the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, where someone has set out a pitcher of water by the road for travelers they will never meet, where kindness is not an event, but a habit, as ordinary and unremarkable as breathing. I unroll the last portion of Paul's letter. The parchment is soft now from handling, warm from being held against my chest as I walked. And Paul's voice, the voice I have been listening to all through this long night, has changed again. The theologian, the teacher, the one who wrestled with deep questions about God and humanity and law and grace, that voice is still here, but it has grown quieter, warmer, more personal. He sounds less like a man writing a treatise, and more like a man writing to friends he has not yet met, but already loves. He begins this section with a simple instruction, and it is one that carries the weight of everything he has said before it. Accept one another, he says, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Accept one another, not tolerate, not endure, not put up with. Accept the way you accept a gift, with open hands, with gratitude, without asking whether you deserve it. The way the olive tree accepted the grafted branch, drawing it in, sharing its sap, making it part of the family without reservation. Paul is speaking to a community that is divided along lines that must have felt uncrossable at the time. Jewish believers and Gentile believers, people who grew up with the scriptures memorized in their bones, and people who had never heard of Abraham or Moses until a few months ago, people whose dietary laws and holy days, an entire way of understanding the world, were fundamentally different from one another. And Paul says, accept one another, not after you have resolved your differences, not after one side has convinced the other, not after everyone agrees on every point of doctrine and practice. Now, as you are, with all your differences intact, because Christ accepted you that way. He did not wait for you to become acceptable. He accepted you in the middle of your mess, in the full knowledge of everything you were and everything you were not. And he said, "You are mine." And that was enough. Paul then reaches back into the old scriptures and pulls out a thread that has been running through the whole story, the thread of hope for all nations. He quotes the ancient songs and prophecies, one after another, showing that God's plan was never to keep his love in a small box, handed only to a chosen few. The plan, from the very beginning, from before the beginning, was that every nation, every people, every language, every person standing under every sky in every corner of the earth would be invited in, would be welcomed, would be accepted. The root of Jesse will spring up, Paul quotes, one who will arise to rule the nations. In him the nations will hope. And then Paul offers a blessing, and it is the kind of blessing that I think was written, not just for the believers in Rome, but for every tired soul who has ever read these words in the dark and needed them to be true. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. I stop walking. I read it again. May the God of hope fill you, not partially, not cautiously, not with a measured, restrained portion. Fill you, the way the rain fills a dry riverbed, the way the sun fills a room when you pull back the curtains, the way the smell of bread fills a house when it is baking, completely, generously, until there is no empty space left, with all joy and peace. All joy, not some joy, not the joy you have to work for or earn or manufacture. All of it, the quiet joy of a Sunday morning, the deep joy of being known, the unexpected joy of finding something you thought you had lost. All of it poured in, filling you up, and all peace. The peace that Paul has been building towards since the very first chapter. The peace that comes from knowing you are justified by faith. The peace that comes from knowing nothing can separate you from love. The peace that comes from knowing the night is nearly over and the morning is near. All of it, given freely, received simply, as you trust in him. There it is again, that word, trust. Not as a condition, as a posture, as the position of someone who has stopped clenching and started receiving. The child in the back seat of the car, the branch connected to the vine, the cup held beneath the pitcher. Trust is just the decision to stay open, to keep your hands uncurled, to let the filling happen, so that you may overflow with hope. Overflow, not just enough for yourself, enough to spill over, enough to reach the people around you, enough that when someone stands near you, they feel it. Not because you are preaching or performing, but because you are full, and fullness, by its nature, overflows by the power of the Holy Spirit, not by your power, not by your discipline or your devotion or your determination, by the Spirit, the same Spirit that intercedes when you cannot find words, the same Spirit that dwells in you, not as a visitor but as a resident. That Spirit is the one doing the filling. You are simply the vessel. You are simply the cup. I hold that blessing over myself tonight, the way you hold an umbrella over your head in the rain, and I hold it over you too. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and all peace as you trust, so that you overflow with hope. Let that settle over you now, like a blanket drawn up over your shoulders, like the warmth that gathers around you when you have been lying still for a long time and the bed has shaped itself to you, holding your warmth, giving it back. You are filled, you are at peace, you are held by a hope that does not depend on you, and cannot be taken from you. One last story comes to me. It arrives like the final note of a song you have been listening to for a long time. The note that does not introduce anything new, but gathers everything that came before it into a single, clear tone. I see a house. It is not a large house. It sits at the end of a quiet street in a town much like the one I am walking through now. The walls are thick and whitewashed, and the door is painted blue, the kind of blue that fades over the years into something softer and more beautiful than the original color. There is a courtyard behind the house, open to the sky, with a fig tree in one corner and a long wooden table in the center. The house belongs to a woman named Ada. Ada is not remarkable by any standard the world would recognize. She is not wealthy. She is not educated beyond the ordinary. She does not hold any title or any office. She is a widow, and she has lived alone in this house for 11 years. And she has one gift that she has practiced so faithfully and so quietly that most people do not even recognize it as a gift. She sets an extra place at the table every evening, without exception. Whether she is expecting company or not, Ada sets one more place than she needs, one more plate, one more cup, one more cloth napkin folded and laid beside the plate, and the door, the faded blue door, is always unlocked. Some nights, no one comes. Ada eats alone with the empty place across from her, and she does not feel sad about it. The place is not a symbol of loneliness. It is a symbol of readiness. It says, there is room if you need it. It is here. But most nights someone comes. The new family that moved to the street last month and has not yet learned where to buy bread. The young man who works at the tannery and whose own family lives 3 days' journey to the east and who has not had a home-cooked meal in longer than he wants to admit. The old woman from the next street whose hands shake too much now to cook for herself, and who is too proud to say so but not too proud to accept a quiet invitation. The traveling merchant who arrived after dark and found every inn full and was wandering the streets with his pack on his back and his hope running thin. They all find Ada's door, or, more accurately, Ada's door finds them. Because people who set an extra place at the table seem to generate a kind of gravity, a warmth that radiates outward, through the walls, down the street, into the night. And the people who need it most are the ones who feel it first. Tonight, 3 people are sitting at Ada's table. There is Kostas, a stonecutter who has been out of work for 2 months and has started to wonder if his hands have forgotten their skill. He is quiet tonight, and his eyes are tired, and he holds his cup of wine with both hands, as if it is the only warm thing left in the world. There is Muriel, a young woman who arrived in the town 3 days ago from somewhere she does not talk about. She has a bruise on her left wrist that she covers with her sleeve, and she eats quickly, the way people eat when they are not sure where the next meal is coming from. And there is old Benjamin, who has been coming to Ada's table every Thursday evening for 6 years, not because he has nowhere else to go, but because this is where he feels most like himself. He tells stories, long winding stories about things that may or may not have happened, and it does not matter, because the telling is the point. The telling is the gift. And Ada always listens as if she is hearing each story for the first time, even the ones she has heard a dozen times before. They are so different, these 3. They have almost nothing in common. Kostas with his rough hands and his silent worry. Muriel with her guarded eyes and her hidden hurt. Benjamin with his silver hair and his boundless, unverifiable tales. They would never have found each other on their own. They would never have chosen each other. But Ada's table is not about choosing. It is about accepting. It is about the radical, ordinary act of making room, of saying, with a plate and a cup and a folded napkin, you belong here, not because of who you are or what you bring or how well you fit, because there is room. And room in Ada's house is never conditional. The meal is simple. Bread, olives, a stew of lentils and herbs that has been simmering since the afternoon, a small bowl of honey, a pitcher of wine mixed with water. Nothing elaborate, nothing that would impress a guest at a wealthy man's banquet, but everything warm, everything offered with the quiet fullness of someone who has herself been filled and is now simply letting it overflow. Kostas eats slowly. Somewhere between the bread and the stew, the tension in his shoulders begins to release. Not because anyone told him to relax, because the room itself is relaxed, because the table has no agenda, because no one at this meal is measuring him, or evaluating him, or asking him to justify his presence. He is simply here, and that is enough. Muriel eats less quickly now. She has taken a second piece of bread, and she is tearing it into small pieces, the way you do when you want the eating to last, when you want to stay at the table a little longer. She has not spoken much, but she has listened to Benjamin's latest story. Something about a fish and a lantern, and a misunderstanding involving a goat. And at one point, very briefly, the corner of her mouth turned upward, not quite a smile, the ghost of a smile, the memory of what smiling feels like, returning to a face that had forgotten. Benjamin finishes his story. He takes a long sip of wine. He looks around the table at these people, these strangers who are no longer quite strangers. And he says, "This is what I come here for. Not the food, although the food is good. Not the wine, although the wine is acceptable." He winks at Ada. "I come here because this table reminds me of something I keep forgetting." "What is that?" Ada asks. "That I am not alone," Benjamin says, and then more quietly, "that I was never meant to be." The candle on the table flickers. The fig tree in the courtyard shifts in a small breeze, and the four of them sit there, Ada and Kostas, and Muriel and Benjamin, in a silence that is not empty but full. Full the way Paul's blessing is full. Full of joy and peace that no one earned and no one can explain. Full of a hope that does not come from circumstances but from something deeper. From the simple, stubborn, world-changing act of setting an extra place at the table and leaving the door unlocked. Accept one another. May the God of hope fill you, so that you may overflow. Ada clears the plates after the guests have gone. She washes each one carefully. She dries them with a cloth. And then, before she goes to bed, she does what she always does. She sets the table for tomorrow, one place for herself, and one extra, because there is always room. She sleeps deeply. The blue door is still unlocked. The courtyard is quiet. The fig tree holds its broad leaves still in the motionless air. And somewhere in the house, in the space between sleep and waking, Ada feels what she always feels at the end of a day like this. Not accomplishment, not pride, not even satisfaction, just fullness. The warm, unhurried fullness of a life poured out and poured into, again and again, like a cup that never runs dry because it was never the source. It was only ever the vessel. You are a vessel tonight, held, filled, overflowing with more than you know. Rest in that. Rest easy. The table is set. The door is open. And there is room for you. I have reached the town now. The streets are narrow and quiet. Most of the windows are dark, but here and there a lamp still glows. Amber light behind thin curtains. The last holdouts of the waking world. A dog is sleeping on a doorstep, its ears twitching in a dream. The air smells of cooling stone and night jasmine and faintly of bread baked hours ago, its warmth still clinging to the walls of the bakery I pass. I unroll the final section of the letter, and what I find here surprises me. After everything, after the soaring theology of the early chapters, after the ache of the middle chapters, after the practical wisdom and the breathtaking benedictions, Paul ends his letter with something disarmingly simple. He sends greetings, he names people, one by one, by name. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, he says, my co-workers in Christ Jesus. They risked their lives for me. Not only I, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. Greet also the church that meets at their house. I think about that. A church that meets in a house, not a cathedral, not a grand building with marble floors and stained glass. A house with a kitchen and a courtyard and probably a table not unlike Ada's, where people gathered and broke bread and shared their lives and stumbled through the mystery of faith together. A house where the door was open and there was always room. Paul keeps naming names, and each one lands like a small warm stone placed carefully on a cairn. Greet my dear friend Epenetus, who was the first convert in Asia. Greet Mary, who worked very hard for you. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my fellow Jews who have been in prison with me. They are outstanding among the apostles, and they were in Christ before I was. I notice that they were in Christ before I was. Paul does not need to say that. It serves no theological purpose. It is simply a man honoring the people who came before him, acknowledging that he was not the first, that others walked this road before he set foot on it, and that matters to him. He wants the Roman believers to know. Greet Ampliatus, my dear friend in the Lord. Greet Urbanus, our co-worker in Christ, and my dear friend Stachys. Greet Apelles, whose fidelity to Christ has stood the test, whose fidelity has stood the test. I pause on that. I do not know what test Apelles endured. Paul does not say, but I know it was real. I know it was difficult, and I know that Apelles came through it, and Paul noticed, and Paul wanted the world to know. He continues, greet Tryphena and Tryphosa, those women who work hard in the Lord. Greet my dear friend Persis, another woman who has worked very hard in the Lord. Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother, who has been a mother to me too. And there, in the middle of this long list of names, is a tiny, almost hidden tenderness. Rufus's mother has been a mother to Paul too. We do not know the story behind that. We do not know when or how this woman mothered the great apostle. Maybe she fed him when he was hungry. Maybe she mended his cloak. Maybe she simply listened to him late one night when the weight of his calling felt too heavy and he needed someone to say it will be all right without needing it to be true yet. We do not know. Paul does not explain. He simply says, she has been a mother to me too. And that single line carries more warmth than 1,000 pages of theology. He names more people, Asyncritus, Phlegon, Hermes, Patrobas, Hermas, and the other brothers and sisters with them, Philologus, Julia, Nereus and his sister, and Olympus, and all the Lord's people who are with them, name after name after name, people we know almost nothing about, people whose stories have been lost to time. But Paul knew them. Paul loved them. And at the end of his greatest letter, the letter that would be read by millions of people across thousands of years, he chose to end not with a grand theological statement, but with the names of his friends, because that is what it comes down to in the end. Not ideas, people, not doctrine, love, not systems, names, real, individual, irreplaceable names, faces you have sat across from at a table, hands you have held, voices you have heard praying in the dark when they thought no one was listening. Paul closes with a final doxology, a last outpouring of praise, and it is as if, after everything he has written, all 16 chapters, all the wrestling, all the wondering, all the weeping and rejoicing, he needs one more moment to say what his heart has been saying all along. Now to him who is able to establish you in accordance with my gospel, the message I proclaim about Jesus Christ, in keeping with the revelation of the mystery hidden for long ages past, but now revealed and made known through the prophetic writings by the command of the eternal God, so that all the Gentiles might come to the obedience that comes from faith. To the only wise God be glory forever through Jesus Christ. To the only wise God be glory forever. And the letter ends. I roll the parchment closed. I hold it gently in both hands. The streets of the town are silent around me. Every lamp has gone out now except one, a single flame in a single window, far down the street, barely visible, barely there, but burning, still burning. And I think about all the people Paul named, all those lives, all those stories, all those quiet acts of faith and service and love. They are gone now, centuries gone, but the letter remains, and the love that runs through it remains, and the God who inspired it remains, unchanged, unhurried, undiminished, still here, still faithful, still burning, like that one lamp in the window, small, steady, enough. I find a bench at the edge of the town square. It is made of old wood, smooth from years of use, and it faces east. I sit down. I set the letter beside me, and I rest. The night is deep now, deeper than it has been all evening. The stars have shifted into their late-night positions, the ones that only insomniacs and fishermen and shepherds ever see. The air is perfectly still. The world is holding its breath, the way it always does in the hours before dawn, that long suspended pause between the last of the dark and the first of the light. I think about everything I have read tonight. I think about the opening declaration that the good news holds a power that rescues, and it is offered to everyone, every single person, without exception. I think about the leveling of the ground, how Paul showed that no one stands above another, that we all share the same need, and the same grace meets us all in the same place. I think about Abraham, trusting a promise so unlikely it should have been laughable, holding an open hand instead of a clenched fist, and that trust, that willingness to receive, being counted as righteousness. I think about the gift that arrived before anyone asked for it, Grace walking into the room and sitting down beside us in the middle of our mess. Not after, during. I think about the old self and the new, the going under and the coming up again, the honest human struggle of wanting to do good and finding yourself doing otherwise, and the rescue that comes, not as a strategy, but as a person. I think about no condemnation, that single, world-altering line. The case closed, the verdict given, not guilty, not because of innocence, but because of love. I think about nothing being able to separate us, not death or life, not angels or rulers, not things present or things to come, not height or depth, not anything in all creation, nothing. I think about the olive tree, the ancient roots, the grafted branches, the sap that flows equally to every limb, every leaf, every piece of fruit, belonging that is not earned but given. I think about one body with many parts, each one different, each one necessary, the listeners and the speakers, the bakers and the healers, the ones who rejoice and the ones who weep, and the ones who simply sit beside you and let you know you are not alone. I think about love being the fulfillment of the law, not rules, not rituals. Love, the kind that does no harm, the kind that shows up, the kind that stays. I think about the night being nearly over and the day being almost here, the thin line of gold at the edge of the world, the faithfulness of the morning, the light that always, always comes. I think about the God of hope filling us with all joy and peace, overflowing, spilling over, more than enough. I think about Ada's table, the extra place, the unlocked door, the room that is always there for whoever needs it. And I think about Paul, at the end of his letter, naming his friends, one by one, with love. Because in the end, that is what matters most. Not how much you understood, but how much you loved, and how willing you were to be loved in return. The bench is warm beneath me. The square is quiet. The town sleeps. And somewhere I cannot see but can feel, the way you feel the warmth of a fire in the next room. The morning is gathering itself. It is not here yet, and that is all right. You do not need the morning yet. You need the night. You need this deep, soft, unhurried dark. You need the rest that comes when you stop reaching and start receiving. When you stop performing and start simply being. When you let your body be heavy and your mind be still and your heart be open to the quiet voice that has been speaking underneath everything all night long. You are loved, you are known, you are accepted, just as you are, not as you think you should be. There is no condemnation for you tonight. There is no test to pass. There is no standard to meet. There is only grace. And grace is not something you chase. It is something that has already found you. It is sitting beside you right now, in the dark, patient as a stone wall, faithful as the morning, gentle as the scent of bread in a sleeping house. Let your whole self go now. Every muscle, every thought, every worry that has been circling the edges of your mind like a bird that cannot find a place to land. Let it land. Let it settle. Let it fold its wings and rest. Your breath is slow. Your body is still. The night holds you the way the earth holds the roots of a very old tree. Deeply, completely, without effort. And Paul's words, those ancient, generous, unhurried words, settle over you one last time, like a benediction spoken by someone who loves you more than you know. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. You are filled. You are at peace. You are overflowing with a hope that will still be there when you open your eyes in the morning. Sleep now. Sleep well. Sleep the way a child sleeps who knows they are loved, without guarding, without grasping, without fear. The road is resting. The letter is finished. The stars are keeping watch, and the morning, faithful, golden, unhurried morning, is on its way. It will be here when you wake. Good night.